Let's return then to Iran's powerful paramilitary Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps that President Trump has told to lay down its arms. The IRGC has grown into a powerful force within the country's theocracy, answering only to its supreme leader and overseeing its ballistic missile arsenal and launching attacks overseas. The Guard rose out of Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution as a force meant to protect the country's government before becoming enshrined in its constitution, operating in parallel to the country's regular armed forces and growing in prominence and power. So how likely is the IRGC to heed Donald Trump's threats? Well, Siavush Randjbar-Daemi lectures in modern Middle Eastern history at the University of St Andrews in Scotland. Welcome to DW. And it's hard really to overstate how deeply enmeshed the IRGC is into pretty much all aspects of Iran.
Yes, indeed. It has grown. It is one of the big legacies, I would say, of Supreme Leader Khamenei. The way he basically converted IRGC into basically a veteran force which took part in the Iran-Iraq conflict, into an all-encompassing organization which does everything from civil engineering through to controlling broad swathes of the economy, having great interest into Iranian telecoms, and of course, handling the Iranian missile capabilities and drones, and having its own intelligence, naval force, land force, and even air force. So the IRGC is now at the forefront, and now the speculation is whether the new supreme leader will have that very, very close bond with the IRGC that, of course, Khamenei had.
And presumably it's important to have that in order to control a country that doesn't really want you there. If you're going to threaten your people, then you need to have a big stick to beat them with, and that stick appears to be the IRGC.
Yes, well, the IRGC also had very rigid, at least the upper ranks, had very rigid ideological loyalty to Khamenei. They were the ones who weren't blinking when it came to, for example, repress street demonstrations, as we saw very recently in January, by obviously using also a specific force they have to control protests and crowds, the Basij militia. So clearly, it's the Praetorian Guard of the Islamic Republic, and any future leader who will eventually emerge in terms of permanent leader once this temporary leadership council is over and they can actually get to choosing the new leader, assuming that there will be an opportunity to do so, will have to, again, as I said, establish a very close link with the IRGC by virtue of its very prominent stand in the current Islamic Republic, assuming that the Islamic Republic will continue as configured, if you want, during the late Khamenei era.
So now we have Iran with no supreme leader and the country and most of its leadership, its senior leadership taken out and under attack by the world's most dangerous military, accompanied by Israel. How likely is the IRGC to heed Donald Trump's threats, give up or face certain death, or indeed to consider whether or not now might be the time to cut their losses and leave this, what they might decide is a failing regime?
Well, the IRGC probably is at the forefront of what we're seeing now in terms of the Iranian response to the Israeli and US assault and offensive. It is the IRGC that's probably behind this constant launching of missiles to Persian Gulf states and Israel. It was the IRGC in recent years that constantly raised the scenario that if Khamenei were to be targeted directly or assassinated, as it happened on Saturday, they would be striking at American interests across the Middle East, including in these Persian Gulf states that have obviously long had diplomatic relations with Iran. They've been at times very close to Iran, like Qatar, or of course tried to close the Strait of Hormuz. So for the moment, the IRGC doesn't see any of this as a backtracking, or it's not taking stock of obviously the very serious blows it received on Saturday. We have to remember that the second IRGC commander-in-chief in a row has been assassinated by Israel within the space of some 8 months. But the IRGC doesn't see it like this. It sees itself as a body that's ready to have a long list of martyrs who died in combat, and is carrying on according to the sort of indoctrination it received and it imbued itself with in the Khamenei era, and is carrying on doggedly shooting the missiles until, of course, it has missiles at its disposal to do so.
Let's turn away from the IRGC for a moment and just get your take on what's happening now. What does your long historical view of Iran tell you about the moment we're going through?
Well, we are in the moment of a very sharp transition. I mean, the transition away from Khamenei, even had it happened in peacetime under far more sort of controlled circumstances, would have been a very difficult moment for the Islamic Republic, based on the fact that in the last 37 years, Khamenei really shaped the office of the supreme leader around his persona, around his own relationship with the rest of the state system, with the IRGC, and with the rest of the Islamic Republic's political class. So I don't think there is a clear script. There might be some preference for certain figures to take over as supreme leader, but those figures will have to reconfigure the office of the supreme leader in very different ways. So we will certainly enter in the new era. And let's not forget, when Khamenei became supreme leader in 1989, they had to reform the constitution of the Islamic Republic in a very significant way in order to usher him in because of various religious and political circumstances, and that could happen again. So we are really in uncharted territories politically, but at the moment I think it's all about survival. It's all about making it to the end of this conflict or the ceasefire, whenever that might be, because obviously there's still a very significant Israeli and American offensive. It's about counting the losses and see who is still alive and who is capable of operating.
Okay.
And then considerations will come as to who the next leader is.
Good talking to you. That's very clear. Dr. Siavush Randjbar-Daemi from the University of St Andrews. Thank you.